each individual frame. You like my example? And that's this part right here. Nostrils and earrings and some ear. I decided not to do a stubbly part or anything, you know. But feel free to look at up close all the details. And this is one of the so those two were made from video, and this one's self-motivated, where the camera decided for itself where it was going to look. And so how that works was really simply, it was just like the memory map looks at how similar images are to each other in order to make a dream. The camera was looking at what it sees in the center of the frame and what it sees on the edges of the frame. When the things on the edges are very different from the thing in the middle, then it would move towards the things that are different. So that's how it would look around at things, which is based on, okay, this is what's in the middle, this is what's on the side, so I'm going to go to the left, now I'm going to go to the right, I'm going to go to the middle. And so this is the result, or one of the results of the camera deciding for itself where it was looking in an architectural space. And then a detail of one component of it. So this is a graph that shows how the camera moves when it's self-motivated. So as you can see, it's very, very chaotic for one. It's definitely not very systematic. It's kind of going all over the place. These areas here and here are places where the camera was really, I call it obsessive. The camera just happened to be looking at certain things far longer than other things, just because they had a kind of structure that made it trapped in those kinds of things. A good example is the image, I think the third from the front on the bridge, which is an image of False Creek in Vancouver, where one of these parts where the camera was just staring at something for a really long time was the image of the sky. So in that particular image, almost 30, maybe even 40% of the collage is just images of the sky, because the camera was looking at the sky so often that that had a much greater proportion. And then there's also some images of condos that are very specific and very, very strongly clustered. To contrast that with how Dream Machine actually looks at things, which is how the camera operates now, is that's more like how the camera moves now. So it's a random walk where it just makes little steps and then randomly decides once in a while to choose a new direction in which to go and then goes in that direction. So they're not exactly straight lines, they're kind of wobbly because they're random, and does a pretty good job of covering the whole space, whereas this really obsesses about individual things. I intended the camera for Dream Machine to be self-motivated, but I had to remove it at the last minute, so that's what we ended up with. Questions? And of course, on the website are videos and more images of all the projects I talked about, and more information and more plots and graphs than you could possibly do. Thank you. Come on, I've got any questions.
You haven't explained when the camera would zoom in and zoom out.
Okay, so this version doesn't have any zooming. So the camera zoomed in all the way, all the time. And the reason why was the original version where the camera was deciding for itself where to look. I couldn't figure out how to make it decide how to zoom. So I had to fix zoom. And even though I'm not doing the motivated camera anymore, it's random again, I didn't put the zoom back in, so there's still no zoom.
Yeah, I think I like the first version where the camera can have their own interests. Now it's kind of like loose mind, no character.
Well, yeah, that's true. The problem with the reason why I had to remove it was unstable. So it worked in order to create the prints. I could run it for 8 hours, but after 3 days, it would crash every time. So it was really like a week before coming, not maybe 2 days before coming to Hong Kong, that I had to decide yes or no, and I had to throw it away. But it's my intention, absolutely, that method will be what I want to have the camera use, how to look around the space. One of the problems with it is that it can be really, really obsessive about things. And so one problem with that is there's this possibility that the camera would, for example, let's take this space. There's a lot of gray brick around. And so it's quite possible that like it was staring at the sky in one of the previous versions, it would just be staring at the gray brick. And because it takes an image, when I was making these prints, it took an image 2 images a second or 1 image a second. And in this case, it's taking an image only after each dream. So it can be once every 2 minutes. So it would be possible that the camera would stare at nothing but gray for, say, 2 days. And I thought that probably is not such a good idea for people being interested. That would be, I mean, one of the longer term idea of the project is that it's installed permanently somewhere. So day by day, week by week, month by month, and year by year, people who live and work around in that area will see how it changes over time. So it doesn't have to do a lot in a short time, that it can become more subtle. And it's fine to stare at something for 2 days because somebody will notice the next week that something's different, or the week after that, or the month after that. But for a short show, it's not so good to have it stare at gray for 2 days, let alone a week. I don't really know how long it would stare because it really depends on, it's really an interaction between the system that looks, decides where it looks, and the context in which it's in. So you don't know until you try it. So it's kind of risky in terms of installation also because of that.
I have a really, really general question.
Okay.
Just because we're in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is such a commercial city, and I'm working in the art dealing and selling, how do you feel about your final pieces being sold as an object? Because you have such a conceptual process.
Yeah. Well, really, so these prints are the first objects I've made in a really long time. So because of that, it's something I haven't thought about much yet because it's so new. I personally believe that the interest and quality and structure of those self-organizing landscapes is so surprising and bizarre and interesting, and somehow both human and non-human at the same time, that I'm fairly happy with those as images, as prints being objects, and that somebody would appreciate it simply on the aesthetic value, get a little pleasure out of the idea that maybe how it was actually constructed is something so deep and complex, but they don't realize that actually is kind of interesting to me. So I would have no problem with people buying them and inspiration. And something else I've thought about is also how electronic media art itself can be bought or sold. And I would be very happy if someone was to commission me to make an artwork for architecture or public space or a mall or something like that. But the way it would work is it wouldn't be based on the object. It would be more like a support contract. So you would pay me by year in order to keep the system working, or making changes to it to make, fix bugs, or maybe the art project as Dream Machine, which has already had 2 different versions, would continue to change. So it wouldn't just be one thing, but kind of be an evolving artwork. So once you buy it, it might continue to change and evolve. And so I think that is where it would be interesting to sell the object, but it wouldn't be selling the object. It would be entering into a relationship with somebody who enjoys the artwork in order to keep the artwork alive for that particular kind of context.
Because it's quite an old question, isn't it? When BEN did his set piece, it was sold to the museum, and the whole idea was about, the act of stepping on and off the chair, but the museum bought it and collected it, and so it's kind of, going in circles.
Yeah, well, in the museum, nobody has the magical idea about how to conserve, collect electronic media art. It's just not really there. The hardware changes so often, the software changes so often. There's some efforts in academic research